Ah, hello, David. We are actually in the green room live, or we're in our rooms live. You know,
And here we are again.
here we are for the fourth Tuesday in a row, and I wanted. I said,
And we're watching each other's hair grow.
right, and
Hmm?
I have shaved a couple of times. And I said that I think I'm going to end up with a mullet, with one of those 80s, mullets, because I'm only trimming the sides of my hair.
Right.
But I wanted to start this on a positive note, and I want to show the picture you sent me. And there it is, everybody. This is David and I at a really happy time at Agape when David come to speak. And that was really a magical evening. And look at the smile on our faces. I mean, that was magical. I mean,
How are you showing this?
yeah.
Oh, there it is. Oh, look. Wow.
Look at us. Look at those big smiles. And now here we are. So, what I before we get going, I'd like to do the thing that we've done the last couple of times and do your invocation and and set the tone of this in more of a calm way, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Could we do that?
Before we do it, how about this time? Is there any request or desire you want to throw into the mix?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
because and we were talking just before we went live. I was hoping this has been 4 weeks, 5 weeks of sort of the shutdown, 4 weeks that we've been doing this. And I was hoping that by now we would be more in a positive note and I would be feeling more positive. And in some ways, it feels like it's getting worse. So what I'd like to throw in there is something about getting more positive and staying more focused on positive and transforming or transmuting what I'm going through into something more helpful and healthy.
All right. So, like we've been doing these last couple of weeks, everything just seems to work better when we breathe and breathe deliberately and consciously and perhaps deeper than normal. So, begin by doing that. I always like to breathe in on the count of three and then hold for a count of two and then slowly release it on perhaps a count of five. And so, just everybody that's watching, whenever it is that you are with this, yourself a moment of intentionality to just breathe your body. Each time you do it, you can make it a little bit deeper. And just know that for those few seconds of deliberate breathing, you displayed an example of directing your energy, meaning that the energy didn't direct you, that you literally stopped and that you formulated your attention and your method of control on the breath. And it reminds us that we are gifted in that way. We have the ability to direct breath and direct thought and direct focus. And yes, it takes training, and yes, it takes things like mindfulness to be able to bring us back to center. But it's good to know, it's good to be reminded that we are capable of that at any moment. And so we allow this invocation or this invitation of all divine energy, of everything that's high vibration, of everything that resonates with solution, of everything that resonates with truth, truth being a capital T truth and not the human dense truth of fact, but unwavering truth, that truth that tells that there is a perfect pattern that exists within all of nature. That's the truth that we breathe in. And we breathe in any support system, anything that is in alignment with that truth. When we breathe it in, we absorb it, we become aligned and united with it, and it helps us reset whatever baggage, whatever laden burden that we have mistakenly given our loyalty to. And that's exactly what this is. It's just setting something down so that we may be free to accept something better. And the thing that we accept that is better or that is in more alignment is the idea that in spite of appearances, there is still that perfect patterning. In spite of how loud the noise gets, there is still a divine unfoldment. In spite of how much we are told it is dire and how much those appearances seem to validate that, there is still that presence, there is still that energy system, there is still that undeniable solution that permeates behind all things. And our greatest gift to ourselves and to the planet is to continue to pivot back, to move back, to course correct back to those things as much as possible, as much as we are willing. And we allow that willingness now to just be heightened for a moment. Anything that is fearful, we can set it aside. It doesn't mean that we won't pick it back up again, but for right now, we just set it aside and we breathe. And we open ourselves up to stimulating solution that wants to come now through the course of action called conversation with Jeff and myself. And we know that whatever comes through is because we have said yes to this willing vehicle of information, of sharing, of community, of like-mindedness. And that the fruits of the product of this, of the seeds that are sown, will not only just stop at the end of this hour, but will continue to have a ripple effect depending upon how many people see it afterwards. And so we lean into that, we accept that, we celebrate that, we relax into that, and now we make ourselves fully available. And one more breath breathing in, we just allow that now to be true and authentic inside of us. So it is.
I feel better. I do.
Well then, hey, let's just sign off.
Right? Well, it was the breathing and breathing with intentionality and not fear that, oh, I'm sick. you know um but I, having said that, listening to all that, and my thought came up in order to bring us back to what we ended on last week is
Okay.
um, uh, see somebody and hear somebody, and this
Mm-hmm.
will also bring into what I was feeling today. The very next day after we talked last week, and we said we would come back this week and we would uh, do a testimonial, if you will, about who I heard and could see. And my experience last
Oh
week,
yeah.
I posted this on my Facebook page. So I go out in the middle of the night to take my garbage out, and my neighbor across the street came out, and we were across both sides of the street, but I could see him, and he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing okay. How are you?" And I could see the anguish in his face, and I could see that he was going through the same things that I was going through. And we started
Mm-hmm.
to talk, and he said, I'm in and out of just feeling like a failure. And I said, well, I'm going to go do my show. So I came in at 8 and did my show at night, and then I called him, and we talked about all of the things as men in this society we are brought up to know that we are supposed to provide for our family. And he was struggling with, I didn't do anything wrong to lose my family, yet I feel like I'm failing them because I can't find work. and I'm not working. And the emotions that he was going through around that. And that's everything that I had been feeling. And uh, I was able to listen to him and let him share with me and then responded, I've been feeling those things too. And I just let him talk and then shared some of what I was going through, and he felt better at the end. And so I was able to see and hear him. And that was the important thing I wanted him to know, is that I'm here and I can hear
Mhm.
you. And we're absolutely going through the exact same thing. And
Beautiful.
what occurred to me is there are people like that are sitting in their homes that don't have an outlet like I have with you, that don't
Mm.
have the ability, or they're afraid maybe to share some of the things they're going through. Like this morning when I woke up and started feeling the weight and stress of this, uh, I dump it right out immediately. Hey, I'm going through this. There are some people that hold that stuff in, and um, there are guys like my friend across the street that he's sitting there with his two little girls and his wife, feeling like a complete failure because he cannot work. And then here are all these people in our country, and I'm going to circle this back around to how we started talking today, as had hoped that we would be on an upbeat note, kind of pulling through this, but it feels like it's not, as the coronavirus settles into the heartland of this country, and it's starting to settle in there. And then you got the people on the coasts and other places wanting to get back to work. It feels like it's getting worse. There's more uh, angst and anger and anxiety around not working and getting the disease both at the same time. And I don't feel as optimistic as I had hoped to feel with you,
Mm.
because here I'm coming like, okay, I'm going to come with something really positive with David, and and yet here I am feeling the weight of all of this and what others must feel like, and who don't have an outlet or don't have a source of camaraderie, or especially as we isolate and not have a group or a family or somebody that we can communicate with, and be vulnerable in feeling like a failure as a man, being having to be the provider, if any. So I think I've kind of given you a lot of ammunition.
Mm.
um, but it is just sort of where I am, and
Right.
it it's not good or bad, like you always say. It's just the state of my being, and this weight I feel on my chest that was making it hard to breathe, I really feel is stress related. As example of just now, when I focused on breathing in the positive way, it was easy to breathe.
Mhm.
It's only hard to breathe when I think I've got the disease. So
Right.
it's all in my head. It's symptomatic. And the anxiety and fear and panic that's sort of running through the course of the country is not helping people stay healthy. And that's just where I'm at. So um my friend.
Mm. Well, the first thing that continues to pop up is acknowledging you.
Mm,
And when I say acknowledging you, um, just the vulnerability and the clarity by which you are able to give voice to that, and it's almost as if you stand in proxy with so many other men who aren't willing to articulate that. One of my hopes would be that everything that you just said could be heard by other men who maybe don't have the willingness, or maybe the skill with the verbiage to be able to articulate what it is that you just offered.
mm,
Because again, that to me is the the high noticing of of willingness. By high noticing, I mean that there is such a high willingness to notice the need to say those things, to communicate those things without filtering, without censoring. And to be in high notice means that we are in such a high state of leaning into and surrendering what we think is appropriate, which to me is such a laden part of the male archetype. You know, just like your neighbor's walking around with this archetype story that he is supposed to fill in the blank. He is supposed to, just because of the gender of his birth. So that's his assignment or his task, if you will. And so, how many of those archetypes and those stories are we all walking around with? So, if one of them is that the man is supposed to be the provider, uh, again, it's a story.
Mm,
It's a story. And so, think about all of the repercussions just from that one story.
mm,
So, then how many men don't ask for help? Again, this is where I have to circle back and acknowledge you, because you you're very good at being that vulnerable and willing, and even to use this as a forum to do that.
mm,
So that's awesome. But how many other men who abide by that archetype won't ask for help?
mm,
And if everything is energy and they won't ask for help, why? Because asking for help is either perceived as weak, it's perceived as non-productive, it shows a lack of, who knows what it shows. But basically, it's all boiled up in there, and with a lot of fear about what other people would think. And so, with that, then the energy of that alone is a repellent.
mm,
The energy of that alone is a repellent that keeps solution away. And solution is so fluid and so vast and so unmatchable and boundless, because it lives in the realm of this all, in the realm of our imagination. It knows no time, it knows no space, it knows nothing of limitation. So to me, solution is something that when I drop all of that pretense, all of that archetype, and I do surrender, then all of the quote, quote, unimaginable ways that solution can show up finally can.
mm,
It becomes the phone call that seems to be out of the blue, when really there's no such thing as out of the blue. It's just that now that particular vibration has an inlet. It's the it's the thing that you see that catches your eye, that sparks the idea. And so, dropping the story and being vulnerable and being willing to ask for what one needs. And then the paradox to that is asking without expectation
mm.
of who it's supposed to come from. And but that doesn't then mean that you just sit on the couch and, eat Hostess Twinkies and not do anything. You have to participate. You have to participate in the same frequency or the same vibration of what it is that you're asking for.
Mm. A couple of things come to mind as you were talking. One, it's the year 2020, and the fact that there are still men in this
Mm-hmm.
country that still hold on to that old vision of I am supposed to be the provider, including me, because that
Mm-hmm.
was browbeat into me as a child, and how easy it is to fall into that and use, especially as somebody just posted on our in comments, lots of financial fear in our culture, and we're we're taught that we're supposed to make sure that we have that money as the man. And I'm
Right.
surprised that in this day that it's still so heavy into men, and this feeling of that we have to be this macho guy, and be that provider and take care of women and the family and the children. It surprises me a little bit that there's still so much of that. It,
Well, I don't. You said in this country. I think it's globally, and so much of that is attached to culture. But we have many of those types of things, those archetypes that we still walk around with that are ancient.
mm,
And again, going back to several weeks ago, um, I think I mentioned that there's still a part of me, I would even say a high percentage part of me, that is actually thrilled about what's on the other side of this.
mm,
Because what's the best way to dismantle an archetype? It isn't to go to dismantling archetype 101 workshop because that's all in the head, right? That's just data and everybody's in a room shaking their head. But to be put into a situation where we, the collective we, are forced into the corners of our melodramas and we have to drop them or bust. So what does that mean? It was like the Ram Dass story I told you last week with the San Quentin prisoners, those who were on death row. It's like, hey, why hold on to an archetype at this point, right?
mm.
So what needs to die? What needs to die within us as individuals in order for us to drop the the parts of the archetype that don't really serve us?
Mm.
And that's not a one size fits all answer.
Right. Conceptually, something that came up also while you were talking about um, uh, the answer and solution is floating out here. But
Hmm.
what struck me is the fear, and the opposite of that is just floating out there too. And
Hmm.
that's just what we choose to latch onto. And that is another uh, archetype, if you will, that I grew up thinking that the first thing I need to latch onto is the fear of what's going to happen. What happens if you lose your job? What happens if you don't have money? And hang on to that. And then I use that then to beat myself up. It's like
Right.
the analogy of having a rope in front of me that's attached to a boot and kicks my butt, and every time I want to kick myself, I pull that rope and it kicks my butt. That's what I use. And so what is it, as you were talking, what is it of that do I need to let go of so I can stop reaching at that's floating around and start reaching for the solutions and do it in spite of everything that's going on around me? In spite of, because everywhere you look, I can't turn on anything without seeing pandemonium and fear and misinformation. And, the people even post on my page things that are absolutely untrue. Like, oh, it's a law that they can't kick you out of your house. No, it isn't a law that they can't kick you out of your house. I mean, and I'm just using that as an example. So everywhere we turn, we're getting misled and fear, and what if we get sick, or what if you how do I latch onto that positive in the midst of all of that out there? I mean,
So basic analogy: when you plant a seed in the soil, there's something called germination process that happens, and you and I don't have to uh, school the soil or ask the soil to enroll in a workshop on what it needs to do with the seed. It's built in. the wisdom is built in. And if the atmosphere remains hospitable, then the seed does what it needs to do, right?
Mm.
So um, I like to call that germination process in the meantime. And I think that we are given opportunities to see who we are in our in the meantimes.
Mm.
So we ask for what we need, or we put forth a request, or we establish a goal, and then there's an in the meantime. And if we looked at that as the litmus test of what we actually believe in and what our values are and what we're loyal to, that really then provides the roadmap for what it is that we might need to work on. Because if I tend to be a person then that freaks out in the meantime, in all of the in the meantimes, then everything that I'm doing that's leading up to the in the meantime is pointless, because I'm going through the motions, because I'm wishing for things rather than knowing the process of germination.
Mm.
And when I wish for things, then that leaves this wiggle room for disaster, rather than knowing that's what a seed does, that's what a soil does. I don't need to micromanage it. Do you follow what I'm saying? So our in the meantime behavior is such a key to what our Achilles heel is. And so if it's just unbelief, then what's the point in going through the motions of the game of quote quote faith if the theme basically is unbelief? Then you got to go back and look at, where did that come from, or at least have some compassionate curiosity as why I freak out in the meantime. That it makes me laugh at that saying that when one when one door closes, another one opens, but the hallways are a bitch, right?
Yeah.
And
Uh,
so,
uh,
how are you in the hallway?
honestly,
How are you in how are people in the hallway? And so, if you start to watch, it's kind of like whatever that quote that Mr. Rogers, said, look for the helpers. When you are in distress, or when the world is in distress, look for the helpers and go to them, because they're the ones who have somehow figured out how to be in the meantime. They're the ones who, regardless of where they are in the hallway, know that the door is going to open.
mm,
Watch those people, study what it is that they do, be hungry enough to want to improve our in the meantime status. Does that make sense?
yes, it does.
And the only way to do that then is to not have everything coddled and fixed for us, but to throw us into the hallway.
Mm.
Okay, go.
Well,
And
yeah.
and that's not to say that as we strengthen that skill that we still don't have our freakouts, but hopefully the duration of them doesn't last and last until we become so debilitated. And so how do you strengthen the same knowing of your own germination process when you plant a seed for something better? How do you do that? You have to practice your in the meantime
Mm.
skills.
You know, when I talk to you, it's really interesting that I always have the same problem. and and you always give me the same answer, but you cleverly word it differently every and
Welcome to my life as a platform minister for uh, 20 plus years, some in my own congregations, and then those traveling. There's only one thing to say. There's only one truth. And how many ways can you find, how many examples and how many stories and how many you know fables and parables can you pull out of the ethers in order to illustrate one thing?
Right.
until someone's able to hear it in the way that they can hear it.
Right.
But yeah, you're right.
In
Smart of you to detect that.
yeah, I always have the same problem, which is, in all honesty, rooted in fear. And this is the thing that I think is really interesting about me is I'm 61 years old. I've had enormous successes. I've had some really low times in which I was down and out, and you've seen me in those times. I have experiences that show me and tell me without a doubt, clear fact, that as I went through those things, I came through on the other side and I ended up being a better person on count of that. Now, here I sit in another one of those kind of in the darkness moments, and
You're in the
I'm in
meantime.
the meantime, and I can't for some reason see, oh, wait, I've been here before. It's always worked toward the good. While I'm in the meantime, it's hard for me to see on the other side of this that is going to be good, even though I have plethora of experiences showing me that I've actually been through this before and I've come out for the good.
Mhm.
And I've I'm fascinated with my own self, that when I get in those moments, like right now, this I'm sitting in this in the meantime, and as last week you said, the outcome could perhaps be this, or perhaps I still love that. Maybe it'll be this way or that way. Perhaps. I mean, I don't know, but I know that something better will come. And is it is it just a human condition that we're sort of born with, and then grow up with, sort of beaten in, that we have to somehow, like the layers of the onion, just dismantle it until it just finally goes away? Does that make any
Right.
sense?
Um, you know what came up while you were asking that was what has worked for me, and I will say it's because of a lot of loss,
Mm,
the loss of human life. Um, I'm 60, and gay man in Los Angeles, New York City, and LA at the height of the era of the AIDS epidemic. And then I meet my first teacher, Louise Hay, who is attributed to establishing the first stigma free forum for people with AIDS to come and freak out. And freak out they did. And I was there from the beginning doing music and helping run sound with my friend Jerry and then his partner. And then we started writing music for Louise. But we were in this atmosphere of a pandemic that um, had also had with it this horrible stigma and judgment and like today, a government who wasn't really on top of it, and many thousands of people died. And and so to be there and then to be in the midst of that, I was just thinking that's kind of like being on death row, because every week, uh, Louise taught a handful of us how to be with people who were dying. So we would each get a list of 10 names, and we would go to someone's house, and they were almost always gay men. And they either didn't have housekeeping, they didn't have somebody for their pets, they were struggling, just everything was a mess, or their families had disowned them. And she taught us how to be with those people and not bring stress to them, not make them feel like they have to entertain us, but to find ways to just calm them. And I would get my list of 10, and in 2 weeks, I would get another list of 10, because those 10 people that would have died. And then on and on the cycle went. And then friends died by the scores. And And then my singing partners, Jerry and Keith, who introduced me to Louise, they die. And so then in the midst of that, there's just all other things that happened in my personal family. So I've been around a lot of death,
Mm.
human death. And so I've sat with that. That's been my in the meantime. What does it mean to die? And so I've cultivated my own reference point with that. And maybe one of my successes, I don't know, with regards to being okay in the meantime is because I'm not afraid of death.
Mm.
And if death is the ultimate thing that we're fearing, then I've kind of dealt with that. Maybe there's still a fear of suffering before dying, or or there's still fear of what other people are going to think, as ridiculous as that
Mm.
sounds. But I think when we've had the experience of being in the midst of the ultimate fear of the human condition, then then maybe those are the helpers that Fred Rogers was
Mm.
talking about, the people that have somehow had a taste of the ultimate fear and have managed to come out on the other side of that to be able to reach out and offer hands to other people. And so, if that's the gift that I have to give to people, because death doesn't really worry me, how do I then translate that in a way that helps you or helps anybody with where they are? I can't say, "Oh, get over it. I've seen hundreds and thousands of people die." That doesn't help you.
Right.
But I can learn to be with you in the same way that Louise tried to teach me how to be with people who only had a couple of weeks to live. And so it really kind of comes down to, what do you believe about death, and what do you believe, how strong are you concerned with whatever it is that you can define that ultimate fear to be attached to.
You know, the beauty of being able to talk with you, and I'm going to try to do this without bawling my eyes out like I always do when I talk to you. um, the actual thought now that I'm 61 and I'm looking at, the 20 years maybe that I have left. I know that at some point I'm going to die, and I've just lost my parents. And the thought of when I've that like this just this morning as I was not being able to breathe all that well. And then I think about the stories about the people dying and losing their breath. And it's not that I'm afraid. I think it's the suffering thing that I'm afraid of. And as you were talking, the thing that I was sort of started coming to me, what you offer to people is, um, and we talk about this all the time, wanting to be seen and heard. Excuse me. This is why at our churches, at Agape and stuff, they pass out Kleenex all the time because people have those, as Oprah would say, light bulb aha moments. But the thing and beauty that you have, the gift you have, is being able to have someone feel as if they're heard and seen. And there are a lot of us that want that, and there aren't that many people that actually can just be where you can be in their presence and you just know that they see and feel you, and just the way we're doing this through this medium here, I can feel you connect to me, and that is where I think the gift is. The number of times that I've sat with somebody and allowed myself to just do this has been uh, healing. And the other thing that comes up for me is, as I was a kid, the other thing that I was taught is that somebody that would allow themselves to be vulnerable like this, they were weak, and that there must be something wrong with you, and I need to give you some sort of advice, and I need to be able to do something to you to make you change. And that isn't what somebody who's in my state needs. I need
Mhm.
somebody who needs to hear, I need to be heard and felt. And I think that's the premise of this whole thing that I've wanted to do from the start, is allow others to see that and maybe start connecting somehow to that same gift and energy of, hey, don't tell me you got to get a job. Don't tell me you got to do this. Don't tell me, put on a mask. Hear me and feel me, you know, and
And tell the truth.
yeah, what is wrong with telling somebody the truth? That,
And understand that it's the truth of where you are at that moment. It's not a carved in stone truth. It's the truth of how you're feeling. And be willing to share that. Does that mean that everybody knows what to do with that? No. But if you don't shut down and you are willing to ask, but also, this is pivotal, Jeff, to be able to receive.
mm,
So I'm going to call you out here for a second. Okay.
okay,
So I know that you were concerned, or you were wanting more people to see these.
right.
You were wanting it to grow. And yet I pointed out to you sometime in the middle of the week, are you now letting people know how they can support you? If they are enjoying the information that you're providing, how can they support you? And you hadn't done that yet.
Mm,
And I said, then, people who don't know how to receive
yeah.
attract people who don't know how to give,
Mm,
right?
mm,
People who don't know how to receive. So what makes us be people who don't know how to receive? That blends so beautifully with the archetype of being the man.
mm,
I shouldn't have to ask, right? I should figure it out myself. So if I don't know how to receive, or if I've been taught that receiving is bad or weak, and that busyness is somehow a virtue, then I will continue to attract people who will just take.
mm,
And believe me, I keep learning this the hard way
mm,
also, right? And so as we soften and as we become more vulnerable in that hallway, or in the meantime, then accept the help, accept the anything. The seed doesn't go, ugh, I hate this water. It just accepts the water, and it starts to do what it's destined to do. So people who don't know how to receive, and to also ask, attract people who don't know how to
mm,
give. And so I want to encourage you to play around with that. That's going to take a little experimenting with if you're not comfortable, because now it's going to look like, oh my God, I'm asking for something. Ask, but then here's the other part. Just let it go.
right.
Reciprocity is really screwed in a lot of people's minds, because they think, if I give to you, Jeff, then I need you, Jeff, to give back to me. And it doesn't work that way. That's not what pure reciprocity is. Reciprocity is you give, and you give freely, and boof, that's it. And you ask, and you don't ask with expectation. You with expecting it to come from one source. You ask with a universal expectation that somehow it will come.
Mm.
I had this old, um, sweet, amazing, beautiful woman when I lived in Los Angeles, that I studied meditation with, and she was from the Joel Goldsmith arena of meditation. And I think I would drive to like Thousand Oaks or something once a week to be with her. And it was going to be her birthday. I think it was 89 something, and I was in my 20s, and I went and bought this beautiful plant, and was so excited to that I remembered it was her birthday. And so I get there, and when class is over with, I go and I give her this plant and I say, "Happy birthday." And she goes, "Ah, David, thank you so much. It's beautiful." And then right in front of me, she turned to this other woman and she goes, "Would you like this plant?" And she gave it to this woman in front of me. And I'm like, "Oh."
That's
And she looked at me and she goes, "What's going on, honey?" And I went, "Well, and she goes, "Was it a gift?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, then, if something's a gift, then you need to let it be a gift. If there's attachment to it, then it's not a gift."
wow.
And she just did that because evidently that was the lesson that she felt I needed to learn in that moment. I never forgot that.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of that, in terms of reciprocity that is screwed with our minds, that is, in all of the archetypes that we're stagnant in. And so we don't know how to ask for what we need, and we don't know how to give without expectation that it has to come from the other person. If you're going to love, love.
Mm,
If you're going to be kind, but don't be kind with an agenda. Don't love with an agenda. Just do it.
right.
And if you can keep your heart open, even in the shittiest of times, then you'll be provided for. And it's not going to be in our timing. It's going to be in the timing when it's right and appropriate.
Mm. You know, while we've been talking, Keely Beckwith chimed in, and
Mm,
he and you both seem to be able to see right through me, no matter what I'm going through. you know, it,
good guy.
right? And I may have even told this story about the one time came to him and started talking. I said, "Can I ask you something?" He said, "Sure." And so I started sharing this story, and he stopped me in the middle of it, and he said, I can hear you, right? I'm hearing what you're saying." And I think a lot of times, uh, and this is kind of in like, if I'm not mistaken, in receiving. When I'm telling a story, I'm not so sure I'm going to be heard and seen, and I'm not going to receive the
Mm,
love back.
mhm,
I'm so used to sharing my story and not being heard and being seen, that when you're hearing me, I don't even recognize it sometimes, because I don't think
mm.
you're hearing me. So that is, sort of goes along with being able to learn how to receive, because it's not just financial that we're talking about.
Right.
It's love. Yeah, I'm not so sure I know how to let people love me.
So let me give you some good medicine. Okay.
Oh boy.
Here's the medicine.
Okay.
So, and this is for everybody. So
Mhm.
instead of being single pointed focused on how do I get people to hear me,
Mhm.
stop and just go hear people, just like you did so beautifully with your neighbor. Let that be the thing that consumes you.
Mm,
How do I, if instead of being, um, single pointed vision towards how do I get people to love me, just go love.
right.
If we were able to do that, then we would remove all of this cart before the horse kind of thing. we would cease to be trying to grab for something that we're not willing, not that we're not willing to give to the other people, but we would find the accessibility of something, um, without the need to be something anything other than the purity of who we are.
mm,
Like I can be available to love because now I'm loving without agenda, not trying to love in order for you to like me, or love in order to validate myself, or that whatever that bullshit line was in Jerry Maguire, you complete
you
me. That's such horseshit, right? Because no one completes
right.
us. We That's why when you the more whole that you become, if you wanted to attach a percentage to that, and you become, whole and full and rich in your own self-acceptance,
Mm,
then you would magnetize someone who's the same way. And then when you have one whole person attracted to another whole person, neither one completes the other. It just becomes a larger degree of wholeness.
mm,
But you know sometimes the quest for romantic love is fill some need inside of me,
mm,
make me assured, let me just drink deep from the assurance that you have, and then before you know it, that person's you know dried up.
yeah, yeah.
Because we're using one another instead of replenishing one another.
The the relationships I have with my children are
Mhm.
a perfect example, I think, of what you're talking about, because they and I know we all love each other unconditionally, and they can tease me and make fun of me and prod me and give me grief about, yeah, the coronavirus is going to get you because you're old. I mean, and but it's coming from a place of, we care about each other, and I know they love, and we joke with each other. Now, I would never have been able to say that to my parents. They would have smacked me, literally would have hit me.
Mhm.
And um but there's an unconditional love that we feel, that I know that no matter what I say to them and no matter what they say to me, w- we're still there for each other. Now, some of that is because they're my children,
Mhm.
but what I'm trying to say, I think what you're saying is, if we can get to that place with people outside of our family, have that same sort of comfort of unconditional love, that no matter what you say, you're still loved and you still love. And
Yeah, and the word unconditional love, boy, that's monumental. And to just be really honest,
mm,
I don't think it's attainable.
well,
I think that in human form, um,
mm,
there's so many things that are under the umbrella of conditioning that we don't even know or aren't aware. But
mm,
each evolution of our attempts, our genuine attempts to try and to lean in and to surrender, then those conditionings or archetypes or whatever you want to call them do begin to crumble. But the totality of unconditional love, whew,
mm,
that's some ascension
well,
stuff there.
yeah, well,
But yes, the best that we can do is to listen,
mm,
without the intent to correct.
oh, yeah, that's the hard one.
Corrective listening, I think, is we don't even realize that we do it. It's so toxic.
Mm,
And I think that when we're not skilled to be able to go, you shouldn't feel that way, but you're so good at this, that's corrective listening, and it's well meaning, I guess, but it doesn't allow the person to just voice what they need to voice. Because without realizing it, we're shaming them in a way.
Yeah.
And so each of those kinds of things that you can look at to strip away your conditions and expectations is so vital,
Hmm.
so vital.
Um, I am guilty a little bit of that with my kids, especially when they start putting themselves down. It's like, okay, just stop it. you know, and
Well, and you know, as a teacher, I've certainly done that with my students and pupils and pulpits, and we give examples of other things to say because sometimes those are mindfulness practices, but you have the ability to discern when corrective listening
yeah,
and is not appropriate. Just
right,
let somebody talk,
right,
you know,
right,
and then again, you got to use discernment because then there are some people that you need to stop them from talking
right,
because they'll just go on and on and on. And so they become professional storytellers, but they don't want to do anything about it. When you find those, you wish them well and you
right,
keep moving on,
right.
right? And it's not about making them wrong because we're a little bit of everybody. We're a little bit of everybody. Even the ones who, you know, who talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and are still telling the same story decades later. Why does that annoy us? Because we've got some of that same stuff
Yeah,
also,
absolutely. Yeah,
right? And so it's just a matter of we're not there to fix anybody. We're just here in you know, I like to put it this way. We're all in hospice.
mm, yeah,
We're all in one phase of hospice. So the moment that we were born, that was the one door that closed, and now we're on the way to the other door of death.
mm,
The moment we're born, the moment we're born, we enter into a phase of hospice.
wow,
And so hospice or hospitable or hospitality, they all have the same root or origin. And it really goes back to a Latin derivation that simply means guest and host. And
mm,
so, what's the host? Well, we're not the host.
yeah,
You could say that planet Earth is the host. You could say that God or universal energy is the host. We're the guest. And how we're treating each other is really the only principal thing to look at
right,
while we're all in hospice
mm,
because we're all going to die. And how do how do we let that then be the thing that leads us rather than, and again, being so goal driven, right?
mm,
And it's great to have goals. Again, everything has a paradox. But then when you become so goal driven that it overrides communication,
right,
it overrides pausing and loving and nurturing one another and nurturing ourselves, then you can make anything toxic. You can make a goal toxic.
mm,
And so, you know, who are we in the meantime?
yeah,
What kind of people are we? What kind of people are we in hospice? What kind of people are we in the hallway? Are we the pushing and shoving kind of people, or are we there to comfort and to greet and to respect one another? And you can't manage everybody.
no. Well, we're at our hour. Um,
Good Lord, how does that happen
I
so
I
fast?
know, and in this time in particular, but before we close, um, a couple of things that just kind of came to my mind is as we talked today, and I cried, and we do the things. It surprises me sometimes that some people may find it, ugly, or I don't really want to watch that because they're talking about all that silly stuff. You know what I'm saying? And
Don't.
and yet
Yeah.
this is the stuff this is the stuff that I think everybody needs to be doing right now, more than any is allowing themselves to be vulnerable. I believe there are some nurses and some people in some spots that are fine, that are more out, but I'm looking at a little broader of a spectrum than just the people that are on the front lines, you know.
Right.
Um, so I want to,
And everybody's on the front line in something,
right,
right?
right. So from that perspective, I want to thank you for allowing me to open up on live on the internet where anybody can view it, and my hope is that somebody gets something out of it and people learn what a gift you are, and maybe, get something, get some gift, some savory morsel of your wisdom and what it is to be uh, open and heartfelt.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Right. It would be.
So if let me be your closing advertisement.
Okay.
If you find this broadcast wherever it is, this in the green room that Jeff Nuss has begun to offer from this COVID pandemic period of being in the meantime, if there's been any episode whatsoever that has been of value to you, then share some of your appreciation with him tangibly through the gift of money, because everybody needs that in human form. And if whatever it is that you can offer, it's not about the amount, it's about the expression. So how can they do that for you?
Well,
Venmo, what's your Venmo?
I'll post it
Okay.
at Jeff
And your pay
at
and your PayPal.
my PayPal. Yeah. And to even take it further, if I was able to get a lot of money, I could actually give to some local people that could use it. Once my cup got full and I could pay my rent, I could then help somebody else.
Well, and here's the thing, whatever comes in, take a little portion of that. It doesn't have to be a lot. It's not about the amount,
Mm,
and share that.
yeah, because
Share that wherever. Don't wait until when something comes in, give a little bit of
yeah,
it. Whatever you feel.
I have been giving to a local food bank where they feed all the local people, and I had, but I
Awesome.
stopped. I stopped these last couple of months, but I think I want to still give them something.
And if resources are low, then give your time
Yeah, absolutely.
and your skill. I love
I
you.
love you too. Thank you so much.
All right.
I'm going to take us out with a little something. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.